Welcome to today's Explainer. Today we're going to dissect an ancient mythological battle that honestly reads exactly like a rapidly escalating modern blockbuster action sequence. We're pulling directly from classical texts to examine a really incredible encounter involving the great hero, Arjuna. And I promise you, the sheer scale of the warfare described here is absolutely staggering. We aren't just talking about crossing swords and shields, we're talking about manipulating the very elements of the earth and the fabric of reality itself. Just listen to this dramatic quote directly from the source text because it perfectly establishes the terrifying world-ending stakes we're dealing with today. This isn't just a minor skirmish, right? To the people actually standing on that battlefield, the level of destruction was so absolute, so totally incomprehensible, that they truly believed it was the ordained end of the universe itself. Keep that profound sense of dread in the back of your mind as we break down exactly how this battle unfolds. Because ultimately, this fight is a complete masterclass in overcoming psychological overwhelm.
Section 1. The Elemental Onslaught.
Okay, let's dive right in and look at how this conflict kicks off with a sheer, overwhelming physical threat. The battle opens with an elemental onslaught that sets a relentless pace from the very first strike. But before we look at the tactics, let's establish who exactly Arjuna is up against. These are the Danavas, also known as the Nivata-Kavachas. Now, these are not your run-of-the-mill adversaries. The text describes them as a formidable group of Asuras, or demons, of truly unrivaled prowess. Their warfare goes way beyond physical combat. They are capable of unleashing immense elemental forces and spreading these profound, mind-bending illusions. Basically, they're about to unleash absolute chaos on Arjuna.
What's truly fascinating here is the absolute tit-for-tat arms race happening on the battlefield. Look at this rapid escalation. First, the demons initiate a mighty shower of crags, literally, rocks the size of massive trees just raining down. Next, Arjuna doesn't just block them. He uses Mahendra's weapon, which strikes like a thunderbolt to crush those rocks into powder. But the Danavas, they don't stop. They immediately summon a catastrophic flood right from the sky with currents the size of an axle covering the entire firmament. And then, Arjuna is forced to deploy a highly specific countermeasure, the flaming Visoshana weapon. So as soon as one physical threat is neutralized, a brand new, completely different elemental threat takes its place.
I really want you to try and imagine the visceral sensory experience here. When Arjuna uses his thunderbolt-like arrows to shatter those massive, tree-sized crags midair, the friction and energy generate actual fire. The text explicitly notes that the resulting rocky dust fell like unto masses of flames. It's just this incredibly cinematic image, a literal burning rain of pulverized stone showering the battlefield before the floods even begin.
And to counter that immense, bewildering flood that follows those flaming rocks, Arjuna responds with this, the Visoshana. It's a dreadful, flaming, celestial weapon that Arjuna learned directly from the god Indra. And it has one highly specific, incredibly devastating purpose, drying up massive torrents of water. According to the text, it works instantly, completely neutralizing that watery deluge that was threatening to drown the entire battlefield.
Section 2. The War of Illusions.
So, having exhausted their physical and elemental attacks with the rocks and the water, the Danavas drastically change their tactics. When brute force fails, they target the mind. The battlefield completely transitions from literal physical destruction into this terrifying war of illusions. The Danavas realize Arjuna can counter their actual elemental weapons, so they begin to spread illusions of unquenchable fire and irrepressible winds. Arjuna extinguishes the flames with aqueous appliances and resists the wind, but then the Asuras simultaneously create a horrific, illusory downpour of rocks and weapons. And it all climaxes with a deep, dense, thick darkness that completely envelops the world. They literally blind him, trying to force that complete psychological overwhelm we talked about earlier.
Moving on to Section 3. A veteran charioteer's terror.
Now, the really crucial point here is how this blinding darkness affects the human mind. The physical weapons were destructive, sure, but the darkness induces pure panic. In the midst of this dense, illusory darkness, we get an incredibly striking visual detail. The steeds turn away in a panic. Matali, the man responsible for steering Arjuna's chariot, literally falls off his seat, and his golden lash drops to the earth. Completely frightened and totally disoriented, he cries out again and again, "Where art thou?" It's this incredibly poignant signal of his complete and utter loss of control. He has been entirely stupefied by the illusion.
Now, why exactly is Matali's panic so significant? Well, consider his apocalyptic resume. He tells Arjuna that he was present at the mighty conflict for nectar between the gods and demons. He drove the chariot during the dreadful destruction of Samvara, and again during the legendary slaying of Vritra for the Lord of the Celestials. He's fought against Vala and Prahata. Matali is a seasoned, hardened veteran of the most terrifying cosmic wars in mythological history. He explicitly states that in all those dreadful battles he had never, ever lost his senses. Until today. Until this specific illusion broke his psychological resolve.
And this brings us right to the core narrative of our explainer, how two veterans handle psychological warfare entirely differently. On one hand, Matali becomes stupefied, loses his senses, and concludes that the Great Father has ordained the destruction of the universe. He essentially gives up to the overwhelm. But on the other hand, we have Arjuna. Now, the text acknowledges that Arjuna also feels a terrible fear when he sees Matali stupefied. But what does he do? He pacifies his own perturbation by his own effort. He talks himself down, readies his bow, Gandiva, and chooses to fight back against the panic.
Section 4. The Hero's Retaliation.
So, now that Arjuna has successfully pacified his own fear and grounded himself, let's explore how he actually fights back against an enemy he can no longer even see. Arjuna speaks these empowering words to his terrified charioteer, announcing his intent. He says, "Behold the might of my arms. Today, even by the help of illusion-creating arms, will I dispel this deep gloom." He tells Matali, "Do not fear, pacify thyself." Arjuna realizes that you just cannot fight illusions with standard physical arrows. He has to fight fire with fire. So he decides to create, for the good of the Celestials, his own illusion of arms, one capable of bewildering all beings, to completely shatter the darkness the Danavas have woven.
From there, the battlefield turns into this hair-erecting, strobe-light nightmare of shifting realities. One second, the world displays itself, the next, it's completely devoured by darkness. One moment it disappears from view, the next it is seemingly submerged entirely underwater. But in these brief, chaotic flashes of visibility, Arjuna finds his opportunity. He starts sending the fierce Nivata-Kavachas to the mansion of Yama, which is a poetic way of saying he begins ruthlessly slaughtering them.
Yet, despite pushing back the elemental threats, mastering his own fear, and successfully slaughtering many of his foes during those flashes of light, Arjuna ends this specific passage with a really chilling realization. He states, "I could not see the Danavas, concealed by illusion." The remaining enemy forces, realizing they are being totally annihilated in open combat, simply vanish into the fabric of the illusion itself. They become a totally unseen threat, just hiding out within the shifting realities they created.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this provocative thought about the true nature of warfare, both ancient and modern. We've seen weapons that can shatter mountains and dry up oceans, but it was the weapon of darkness, the psychological illusion, that actually broke the mind of a cosmic veteran and nearly brought a hero to his knees. So I have to ask you, in the ultimate battle for survival, is the greatest threat the enemy you can physically see, or the psychological illusions that blind you? Think on that for a bit. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep seeking clarity through the noise. Catch you next time.